Almighty God, who in thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor as thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interest thou hast committed to our charge, all which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I see you have, Mr. Speaker, new microphone system. You will speak about this, right? Oh, okay. But I want to thank yourself, Mr. Speaker, and of course the distinguished clerk of the House for improvements I see. I see you have some new curtains and they sort of matching the chairs, you know. So I want to thank you for that. And I guess, as you said, you will speak to the microphone system. But Mr. Speaker, I would like to move for an amendment to the order paper. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion to insert report from committees as item 8. And as a consequence, the renumbering of the order paper, which follows that item further under that item, insert sub-item numeral number 1, report from the Standing Orders Committee, and also under item 10, public business, government business, motion, to insert the motion, and I quote, the report of the Standing Orders Committee on the appropriate date from which the payment of salary to elected representatives and senators should be calculated, end of quote. As item C. Are we here? Okay. And the second and third readings of bills as item D. And both to form part of the order paper. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the report from Standing Orders Committee, the report from committees be inserted as item 8 on the order paper, and that the report from Standing Orders Committee be inserted as 8.1 or Roman numeral 1. Also, on the public business, item 10, insert sub-item C, that is, the report of the Standing Orders Committee on the appropriate date from which payment of salaries to elected representatives and senators should be calculated. In addition, the second and third readings of the bills would then become item 10D on the order paper. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. just organize that then. Okay. Yes, proceed.
I'd like to extend sympathies to Member of Parliament for Colliho on the passing of our brother. Mr. Daniel, affectionately known as Akoy, was a very friendly person who used to frequent Salisbury very often, selling his fish. Very cool guy. I know he'll be laid to rest maybe sometime Tuesday. I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of the community of Salisbury, Kulibistri and Monarchet, to extend sympathies to Lady Catherine Daniel on the passing of her brother, and also take the opportunity to extend sympathies quickly to the family and friends of Mr. Franklin Larrock, better known as Bai of Kulibistri, who passed away yesterday. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I rise on behalf of this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, to extend condolences and sympathy to our sister and colleague, Honorable Catherine Daniel, on the passing of her brother. We wish her all the strength in this time of bereavement and grief. Mr. Speaker, it's not an easy task. It's not an easy feeling to lose Mr. Speaker, the feeling doesn't change even when the person has gone through a period of illness, be it prolonged or a short period of illness, or even if they died suddenly. Mr. Speaker, it always leaves a void in your heart, and we can only say to you, Honorable Daniel, that time heals all wounds, and we hope that the memories that you shared with your brother, you can cherish them, and that in itself will serve as a sort of strength as you continue throughout the bereavement process. We know that you are a deep woman of faith and of prayer, and we know that in times of this you have depended on your faith and your relationship with God. I've seen you through difficult periods in the past, and I'm sure that this will be no different. We want you to know that we are all here with you, and we all condole and sympathize with you at your time of bereavement and grief. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Mr. Speaker, while I'm at my feet, I'm sure you'll permit me also the opportunity, I crave your indulgence, to also extend our heartfelt sympathies to Mr. Pelwi, originally from Dubla, but better known as a person from the Cottage, from Cottage itself, in the Cottage constituency, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Pelwi has always been close to the political process. For years, he was a stalwart of the Freedom Party, and then, Mr. Speaker, gravitated to, pardon me? He actually, right, exactly, he contested elections for the Dominica Freedom Party, so he was a politician, even though not a member of Parliament, but he sought elected office through the parliamentary route to serve in the Parliament, and he has served Dominica with distinction. He was a teacher for many years. He taught many persons who even now at present are making their contribution, not only in the teaching profession, but throughout the public service and throughout Dominica in general. And we treasure and remember his memory. A very outspoken person, Mr. Speaker, a man who told you what was on his mind, told you what he felt, and always had a good advice and good counsel for young, upcoming politicians like myself, even if for a certain amount of time I was on the other side of the spectrum, but even more so when he joined the Dominica Labour Party and really supported us. He always had a word of good counsel, good advice for me personally, and I'm sure the rest of my colleagues. And we treasure his support and his good counsel. And it is supporters like that that have made us the sort of formidable institution that we now are at present. And we mourn his loss. We'll always remember his contribution to our organization, both collectively and to us personally, in the development not only of our political institution, but of Dominica, because that is for one of the things that he stood for what was right and true and just for Dominica, no matter the consequences. He stood for it, and we remember his memory fondly in that respect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I just would like to express my appreciation and thanks for the condolences expressed towards my family. Mr. Speaker, dying is part of living. And as we're not too saddened by the death, because one thing in life, we need to make our election right with God, especially when we reach a certain part in our life where God has given us chances upon chances. So let's live in that harmony and peace and ensure that when we are called on to the other side, that God will say to us, well done, good and faithful servant. And so I just say thank you very much on behalf of my family.
Confirmation of minutes. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for once with your new setup, I thought you had the ability to see who was requesting the floor, so I quietly awaited your acknowledgement. Mr. Speaker, I rise to take the opportunity to congratulate our Honorable Prime Minister, the political leader of the Dominica Labour Party, on receiving the Jose Marti Award from the Great Republic of Cuba. Mr. Speaker, this award speaks to the commitment of our political leader and Prime Minister to social justice, equality, fairness, and commitment to improving the lives of the people, not only of Dominica, but of the Americas. We have always recognized that Cuba is an integral part of the Caribbean and the wider Americas, and we continue to support motions that will allow Cuba to be integrated into the global economic and financial system. Prime Minister Skerrit has taken this as a mission for the last 18 years serving at the helm. And today, the government of the Republic of Cuba has recognized his efforts to show their appreciation for the work that he has done to advance the cause of the Cuban people, the Caribbean people, and the people of the Americas. This award speaks very loudly to the caliber of leader that we have as a party, as a country, because Jose Marti was one of the most prominent figures in the history of the Republic of Cuba. And I think this award is so fitting because Jose Marti himself, as a freedom fighter, as someone who fought hard for education, social justice, equality, not only in the Cuban Republic, but in the Americas, for our Prime Minister to be awarded such a high honor, that is something that all of us must be equally proud of. Mr. Speaker, once more, I wish to congratulate our Prime Minister and political leader, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, on the receiving the Jose Marti Award.
I myself would like to, it would be remiss of me not to commend our Honorable Prime Minister on the receipt of this highest award. But I would also like to say that when one Dominican, especially remember Dominica is a small island state, so when one Dominican rise, it really redounds to the benefit of all of us. So if one Dominican is a finalist in Olympics, then Dominica and Dominicans should be happy and excited. Whether it's for West Indies, we should be happy and excited. In the case of the Honorable Prime Minister, once again, we see, and not just based on us in Dominica, but the international world and people around, even in the region, in the case of Cuba, have recognized his humility and his strong leadership and the championing of the underprivileged. So we, all of us, I think, in Dominica, not just in just the House of Assembly, should be really, really proud of the achievement of the Honorable Prime Minister. And he has taken it really with humility. And therefore, I'm asking all members of the House, this Honorable House, let's give him a serious round of applause. Let the whole world hear. Yes, Honorable Linton.
Mr. Speaker, as I'm on my feet, I think it would be remiss as we in the mood to recognize patriots of this blessed land who passed on, those who have come to national attention for the significance of their work. I condole at this time on behalf of my colleagues, and I'm taking the liberty to say on behalf of the Parliament of Dominica, with the family of Louis Gabriel of blessed memory. He was a captain of industry in Dominica. He was a philanthropist of very high caliber, and he served his country well. And may his soul rest in peace. But Mr. Speaker, I too want to congratulate the Prime Minister on his receipt of the award from the nation state of Cuba. The award is in the name of Jose Marti. And just so we remember as a parliament who Jose Marti was, I want to read into the record of this parliament 3 quotes from Jose Marti, the Cuban philosopher and freedom fighter. To use for our exclusive benefit what is not ours is theft. He who uses the office he owes to the voters wrongfully and against them is a thief. He who receives money in trust to administer for the benefit of its owner and uses it either for his own interest or against the wishes of its rightful owner is a thief. May these important lessons of governance live with us and breathe with us in the spirit of the award that the Prime Minister of Dominica has received from the government and people of Cuba in the name of ancestor Jose Marti. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to lend my voice to the congratulatory remarks that have been extended to our Honorable Prime Minister on his receipt of the highest award of the People's Republic of Cuba, the Jose Marti. To humanity in office while being the Prime Minister and leader of our nation state. But it goes deeper than that, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the person, the Roosevelt's character, the person, Mr. Speaker, his very upbringing, his socialization, Mr. Speaker, the person that he is, and coming up from humble beginnings, Mr. Speaker, in his small community of Vekas, always caring for his brother man, for his fellow man, even well before he decided to enter politics, Mr. Speaker, always giving of himself, always charitable. That's the kind of person, Mr. Speaker. So long before the Prime Minister even decided to run and to represent his people not just as the Prime Minister of the country. In fact, I would say that these are the attributes which convinced his peers at the time, who were the members of Parliament at the time, Mr. Speaker, to look to him for leadership and to choose him upon the death of our leader, Honorable Pierre Charles, to become the leader of this country. And what a great decision that was, because we see right now the fruits of that decision. And those are the deliberations, Mr. Speaker, that must have gone into the award of this great honor upon our Prime Minister. And nothing that anybody says, Mr. Speaker, can change the fact that the record is clear. The record of work, the principle upon which the Prime Minister has stood uncompromisingly, Mr. Speaker. He has always said that we do not have daylight friends and nighttime friends. We have friends because we stand on principle, and we have always stood on principle with the Cuban people, Mr. Speaker. And it's not only the Cuban people, because this is just one of many awards and accolades which the Prime Minister have received, because not only here in Dominica, not only regionally, but internationally, Mr. Speaker, he is well regarded and respected among his peers. So this is clear, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think anything that anybody says to the contrary can take away this fact. And so we revel in this award with you, Honorable Prime Minister. We congratulate you. And I'm sure that I speak on behalf of the great majority of Dominicans, no matter what sphere of society they come from, when I say that we appreciate the work that you have done, the sacrifices that you have made for your fellow men, both here in Dominica and outside of Dominica. And that is why we'll continue to stand by you and stand with you to thick and thin. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I want to express my gratitude, my thanks for the commendation of the House. Just to say that those who know me would know that I am not someone who likes the crowd. I like to be watching the crowd rather than the crowd watching me. And what I do, or what I have done, and what I continue to do, is not to get any praise. It is to carry out what I believe to be a Christian and biblical duty to advance the cause of especially less fortunate. I have sacrificed more than most to the service of this country. And in very difficult circumstances. My position with respect to injustice globally is well recorded globally and in this country. And I am not someone who will state my position privately, and when it comes to show this publicly, run to hide. We have continued to stand in absolute solidarity with the government and people of the Republic of Cuba. And this government, this party, has always stood in condemnation of the embargo placed by the United States on Cuba. And we will continue to do so until that embargo is removed. We have also called on President Biden as a start to reinstate the Obama-era positions and policies in respect to Cuba. I want to commend President Biden for starting the process, but we'd like to see him go further on these issues. And we've also condemned the United States for not inviting Cuba to the Summit of the Americas. We believe that Cuba is an important part of the hemispheric community, and that they have a very critical voice and critical role to play, having been at the vanguard of the transformation of healthcare services in every single OAS country, and who have been formidable in their contributions in saving lives during this pandemic by providing doctors and nurses and technicians at a time of profound crisis within our hemisphere. And that they have, I believe, the greatest experience to share with us on the agenda items at the Summit of the Americas. And just to say to this House that when the government of Cuba decided to bestow this honor on me, and I accepted this honor on behalf of the people of Dominica, it took me a few days to respond to them, because this is not what I do for. I play my part where I can play my part with the knowledge that the Lord has given to me and the strength that the Lord has given to me, and that's it. So those who want to cast all sorts of aspersions, that's fine with me. That's not going to change anything. What it will do is that all of us in this house, we have children. And we are leaders of this country. And then when we do not celebrate and recognize people who have been recognized, what kind of message are we sending to our own children, far more the children of this nation? That's what it is. And so if we want to play politics in every single thing under the sun, then that's a matter between you and your God. That's it. When we bestow national awards on Dominicans, it is a time for celebration, recognizing the contributions that they have made. And when a country bestows an award on us, because I am not the only one working in the advancement of the causes, I just happen to be the leader at the time. What kind of message are we sending to? That we have to always preach a sense of hate, division, discord? What is going to gain us if that's all we preach? That's all we sow? How are we going to be able to live with our soul? And so, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to walk in humility as I continue to carry out the duties that the Lord has ascribed to me, has assigned to me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Confirmation of minutes.
Mr. Speaker, before we confirm the minutes, I just wanted to make an observation about the content of the minutes. It's not anything to do with any specific item in here, but just to make the observation that in this Parliament we debate matters, and these minutes, and I think it's settled practice, but I think I need to say it, these minutes do not capture the pith and substance of debate contributions, but these minutes are very detailed on points of order, interventions, and interventions by the Speaker. So while we don't know, in essence, in one or two or three sentences, what the debate contributor said, we know every single standing order objection that was made, and every single time the Speaker intervened. And I'm wondering whether that is the purpose of the minutes, because in the meeting of the 29th and the 30th of November last year, there were 22 interventions by the Speaker, all of which were carefully laid out, and we know what they were, for what purpose. And I'm just wondering, since we come here to debate matters, whether the minutes should also be capturing the essence of debate contributions in a few lines or bullets, so that we know what people said. I know Hansard is detailed on that, but I put this for the consideration of the House because it seemed odd to me that we could be spending all this time on the point of order objections and the interventions by the speaker and so on, but nothing to say about what people said in debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Noted, but if there are certain issues that you have, when we send out the draft minutes, you could point it out to the clerk and we could make adjustment as per your suggestion. But noted.
That's what says the House, Mr. Speaker. We have the Hansard, and the Hansard gives complete details of everything said in the House. I must reiterate on that point. But when you come to the minutes, the question is, which parts do you leave out and which parts do you include? And so that's where the challenge will be, insofar as a suggestion coming from the leader of the opposition. So that's the complexity of it.
Yes, Honorable Charles.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising to make an amendment to the minutes. On page 1, on the government, to indicate that the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Kenneth Darrow, was indeed in the House at that sitting. Page
On
1.
Page 1. Honorable. So you are saying that the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Darrow was present, but he didn't remember. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I tell everybody to attention, so she decided to.
Yes, noted. Page 2, or page 1 still? Page 1, page 2. Page 3. Page 4 and 5. 6, 7, 8. Nine and 10. 11, 12, 13. Page 14. 15, 16. Any comments thus far? 18, 19. 20, 21. 22, 23, 24. Page 25, 26. 27, 28, 29. Page 27, 28, 29. Yes, Honorable Dennis.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make a correction
On page
9.
Page
9, 7, government notices. Second paragraph.
Page 9?
Page 9.
I'm not hearing you clearly. Could you remove your mask?
Page 9 on the government notices.
Yes.
Second paragraph.
Page 9. Government notices, second paragraph. Yes.
Yes, it says the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dennis Charles.
That's a promotion? Okay, so we'll make the adjustment there, amendment there. So, Honorable Clerk there, Mr. Clerk, Mr. James, will note it. We're back to page, where we are? Page 20 what? 29. Page 1, nothing. So page 30, 31, 32. 33, 35, 34. Back to 20 and back to 35. Any comments? 37, 38, 39, 40. 41, 42, 43, 44. (44, 45, 46, back to page 1 in summary. Any comments? I note what the Honorable Lennox Linton have said, but I also wanted to point out to the Honorable House that from the time we accept the minutes become public record, but most importantly is so that members could even refer to the minutes, especially in regards to decisions. So if we have issues with certain decisions, we could come to my chamber, we could discuss it, and I'm urging all members to watch the details of the minutes. And we'll see in the details of the minutes where we point out specifically which standing orders that we think at the time in regards to the ruling, and therefore if we have issues with certain decisions, we can discuss in a chamber. But I'm happy that when I went through the actual minutes, I recognize, and AG, you'll remember that you guided us in some of the intervention, that a lot of the decisions were very clear. So I'm very, very happy that the minutes are here so we could actually see the decisions. We are not perfect in this house, but we have to be guided by the rules. Guided by the rules. So, the page 1 to what? 40 what? 46? Any comments? Okay.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw your attention to page 21.
Yes.
I would just like to say that I also made a contribution to the debate which is before the House. I would have spoken after the Honorable Minister for Youth Development and Empowerment. So I note that it was not recorded in the minutes.
Okay. Noted. The amendment will be made.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I mean, and even to the minutes, I know Senator our senator from Vickers on the opposition side came and he had a discussion in regards to your intervention. But again, I like what he did. We need to come to the chamber and have a little discussion. And as the Honorable Prime Minister said, we are here to do the people's business and we should not be unhappy. You know, we should be really doing things, though we might disagree, but let's do it in an amicable way, you know? So yes. So, members, someone can move that the minutes be adopted if we agree.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the minutes be adopted as amended.
Yes.
So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the minutes of the proceedings of the second meeting of the second session of the 10th Parliament, that is to say, Mr. Speaker, Monday, 29th November, Tuesday, 30th November, and Wednesday, 1st December 2021, be adopted as amended.
Any second? Okay.
Seconded.
All right. Second, Mr. Speaker. It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting of Monday 29th, Tuesday 30th November, and the first, that is Tuesday 1st December 2021, be confirmed as amended. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The minutes is adopted as amended.
Announcement by Speaker.
I received a letter from the Honorable Danny Luge. He's written seeking permission to be absent from this sitting. He's unwell. Permission was granted. Also, Honorable Melissa Popon-Skerrit has written seeking permission to be absent from today's sitting. Again, permission is granted. She's out of state. We have received no questions. And in regards to question, I just want to say that I'll give a little summary as to where we are right now in regards to what we have achieved so far. But I wanted to just point out to this honorable House that we have received no questions. And I've always been adamant to the fact that there are certain pertinent matters that might come up in the course of debate that I think that if a question is asked, then it will not be a point of contention, because we need to at least show that we have sought information and we have sought to find out what the facts are before we bring it as a debate point. You know, so I just wanted to point out that no question. Also in the past, the issue of question used to be a point of contention, that especially members of the opposition would indicate that they asked questions and questions were not placed on the other paper. But since I've taken over, and bearing in mind that I've served on both sides, I recognize the sensitivity, and I've discussed with the ministers, and I know there are many questions which have come to the Prime Minister. I've discussed bilaterally with him, and all questions were accepted, all with making little grammatical changes. So I just wanted to point that out as a major, major improvement in regards to what the opposition had contention about. In regards to committees, again, all committees have met. As a matter of fact, all committees have met several times. Again, I would like to commend the chairman and members of all committees. Let's give all members a round of applause. So that's a major milestone. So all have met, and I'd advise that whether there is any substantial decision, but I would advise that all committees should send report to this honorable House, whether or not it is a decision in regards to an investigation, but a report with information to the House. So at least everyone, of all members of the House, can be informed, so informed. In regards to some of the administrative matters that would improve efficiency of the House, I would like to thank the Honorable Minister of Finance for providing the resources, not just the Honorable Minister of Finance, but the Ministry of Finance, that is the FS, and the team for providing the resources for the procurement and the installation of the audio system, which you would see that we have new audio system in place, which was at a cost of $44,280.04. According to Honorable Blackmore, when you start saying cents, then you know it's real. So that was the cost there. We have placed instructions in terms of just procedural instruction on how to operate it. And that is, again, I know the Prime Minister had promised in the House that he would provide the resources. It was provided. So we just want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the Ministry of Finance for so providing. Thank you. You see that all members have been assigned to their actual seat. So just to point out that we expect all members to wear their mask as much as possible. Sanitizer have been provided to all members on their desk. So be guided accordingly. I think generally that's it in regards to our announcements. Yes, so thank you. Yes, your mic.
Mr. Speaker, last February 2021, both the Honorable Danny Luge and myself submitted questions to be answered by the relevant ministers of government. And in two cases, the questions were not answered. We are still to receive answers to those questions. And your ruling was that we cannot, in the House, force anybody to answer a question by any time, when the rules are very clear as to the procedure for submitting questions, for answering questions, the time allocated, and in cases where verbal answers are requested but cannot be given within the approved time in the House, a procedure for written response is laid out, which was not adhered to at all in the case of those questions we posed since February of last year. So we are battling some serious disadvantages in this House. And of course, it would be good when we get notification for the date of Parliament, because we have no parliamentary calendar in Dominica, unlike other parliaments in the world that we know they meet every Friday or they meet every month. We don't meet regularly. We meet when the government is ready for us to meet. So the last time we met was in November of last year. And it would have been nice to know in advance that we're going to have this meeting today. And so maybe we could put some questions for the ministers to be answered at this meeting. However, we get meetings 12 days, we get notice 12 days before, but we are supposed to submit the answers to the questions 14 days before. So anytime we get notification for a meeting, it means there's no chance of putting in any question for the meeting. So I make these observations in response to your glowing report about questions and your note to the world out there that there were no questions for the sitting of the Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, the Honourable Member for Margaret has given a somewhat misleading presentation a moment ago. The previous speaker made it very clear on several occasions that those who wish to raise questions in the House need not wait until a date for Parliament is announced. In other words, the Honourable Member said the last sitting of Parliament was November. What I am saying is that the factual position, as opposed to the position he put forward, is that at any point between November and now, he or any member of this House could have submitted questions to the House via the clerk of the House. And those questions would have been before this Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, you were entirely correct to say, as you did, to this House and to the world, that no questions were put forward for consideration or answer at this Parliament. And if the Honourable Member for Marigot, as he just is shouting, that is not in dispute, then it means that he has been dishonest, as opposed to what I said at the beginning, when I said he was perhaps a little misled. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, the member must take back his statement that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is dishonest. Dishonest about what? Dishonest about what?
Mr. Speaker, the interjection by the Honourable Member was that effectively he was saying that there was no dispute, that there was the opportunity to ask the question. That is not what he told the House when he stood up a moment ago in his contribution. And whether or not he is happy with my characterization, then that's a matter for him. But I have no intention of withdrawing what I said.
That makes you extremely dishonest.
Mr. Speaker,
let us proceed, yes.
Yes, can I just make a small intervention with this? Recently, Mr. Speaker, you spoke about the committee's meeting, and I want to commend the House and members. But the Privileges Committee met some time ago, and we had a very discussion. I brought it up, and you were there, Mr. Speaker. And I made it very clear that we had 14 days before, and we could ask questions, and they would tell us if we have maybe a day and a half or the afternoon to send in our questions. So we'd be able to send in real-time questions. Mr. Speaker, we can make sending questions 3-4 months, I don't know when it's Parliament, and sometimes the questions become irrelevant. What we are asking, the opportunity that we are asking, 7 of us, Mr. Speaker, asking that to give us time, the 7 days, the 14 days rule, where we can get a few hours to ask real-time questions. That is what we're asking in the interest of the House. and the country that we can ask questions on behalf of our people. But when we ask questions 3-4 months, the last time we met was in November.
Ask a question in December, we can answer for you.
So you want us to ask questions in December, January, February, March. And we have some real-time questions that we can ask that happened last week, 2 weeks ago. Come on. That is what we asked. That is what the member of parliament is asking for, Margaret. And we raised that concern with you, Mr. Speaker. I was very disappointed when you spoke and you didn't make mention of that.
Yeah, member, you did not raise a question with me. You at a privileges committee meeting, and we cannot discuss the details of the meeting there, because it's not like, hold on, just make the point. We have not placed a report that we can discuss. You made a point, and that's why I said, when we meet at the different committees, we'll make recommendations. The rules in regards to questions are very, very clear. If we think that we need to improve and we think it's a continuous process of improvement, then we'll make those recommendations, for example, to the Standing Orders Committee. We'll bring the recommendations to the House, the entire House, and the entire House will determine whether or not the House agrees or disagrees. But we gave a report. The report was factual in regards to whether we received questions or not. So let's just move on. I allowed everyone to at least make an intervention. So we'll proceed. Yes, Honorable Prime Minister.
I label the point, but yes. I think the records need to be clear that every sitting of this House has been convened and conducted within the rules, respecting the rules. That's important.
Yes.
That's one. Secondly, if there are people who believe that they need more time, I agree with you, Mr. Speaker, that we could look at this at the Privileges Committee or the Standing Orders Committee and so forth. But we don't. How we don't ask? But every opposition party since before independence, and especially post our independence, have conducted the House within the rules, and they've always presented questions. I know you have presented questions. There is no situation where you have never presented questions. If on this occasion, if
2016, that opportunity we had, the 14 days down, it's somewhere around 2000.
No, but it doesn't have 14. No. Anyway, I don't think you want to be educated on this thing. So
yes, that's why I was saying, Honorable Prime Minister, let's proceed. We have followed the rules to the T. If we need to improve, we'll improve at the relevant committees. So let us proceed. Let's proceed.
Report of committees. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table the report of the Standing Orders Committee on the appropriate date from which the payment of salaries for elected representatives and senators should be calculated. Government notices.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the later stage of the proceedings, I will be taking all stages of the bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Business Act 2022, standing in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Investment, Telecommunications, and Broadcasting on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at a later stage of the proceedings, I'll be moving the motion, authorization for a credit facility from the International Development Association, IDA, for funding of Dominica's COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery, standing in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the later stage of the proceedings, I'll be moving the motion authorization for the International Development Association for financing of a disaster risk management development policy with a catastrophic deferred option standing in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Investment, Telecommunication, and Broadcasting, on the other paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the later stage of the proceedings, I will move in the motion a report of the Standing Order Committee on the appropriate date from which the payment of salary to elected representatives and senators should be calculated, standing in my name on the order paper.
Statement by ministers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, on April 1, 2022, the government of Dominica regained controlling interest in the Dominica Electricity Company Limited, DOMLEC. While on March 30, 2022, through national media, I told the nation of government's intention to acquire then DOMLEC majority shareholder, Emera Incorporated, shares in the company, and subsequently confirmed the acquisition. I believe that this pivotal, strategic, and historic accomplishment by this Dominican Labour Party-led government for the people of Dominica should be recorded in the Hansard of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, let me make this clear. The United Workers' Party was mistaken and short-sighted when it sold government's 72% share ownership in DOMLEC on such generous terms. DOMLEC was at the time a profitable company serving the interests of the people of Dominica.
That's right.
And Mr. Speaker, I will add that members of the United Workers' Party who are now sitting parliamentarians have also come to realize it was a bad decision, though they will not state so publicly. On March 31, 2022, the government of Dominica purchased all of the shares of Dominica Power Holdings Limited, a company registered in St. Lucia. This is the company which was owned by Emera up to March 31, 2022, and owns the 407,394 shares, ordinary shares, or 51.9% of DOMLEC's shares. Mr. Speaker, government previously informed Emera of its interest in acquiring its shares. The company was, however, hesitant to divest its shares in DOMLEC, given that DOMLEC has been, year after year, generating profits, but for the setbacks caused by Hurricane Maria. However, this time around, with government's plans and significant progress towards transitioning to renewable energy, and the fact that very soon, with the commissioning of the geothermal power plant in Loda, DOMLEC will have to purchase the electricity generated by the government of Dominica Geothermal Development Company, DGDC. Emera agreed to negotiate divesting its shares to the government. Mr. Speaker, Emera proposed to sell the shares at a market price listed for DOMLEC shares on the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, which is EC $3.50 per share. At that price, Mr. Speaker, government would have had to pay a total of EC $18.9 million for these shares. However, we are happy to report to the House and the people of Dominica that following months of intense and cordial negotiations, that government purchased the shares at a total of US $5 million, or EC $13.5 million, which is $5.4 million, or 28.6% less than the listed value. Mr. Speaker, I hope you have noted the current listed price of a DOMLEC share, that is $3.50. And you have noted also that government only bought back 51.9% of the shares. which means if the Unayokos party had not sold the 72% of the shares that government owned for $21 million, these shares would have been worth at least $26.3 million today. And then, Mr. Speaker, add to that the dividend that Dominic has paid to its shareholders since the sale of the UWP by the UWP in 1997. 72% of these would have been income for the government and the country. Mr. Speaker, just over the past 12 financial years, that is from 2009 to 2020, Dominic paid dividends totaling $24.8 million. The only years during that period where there were no dividends were in 2018 and 2019 because of Hurricane Maria. Of the $24.8 million paid in dividends during 2009 and 2020, 72% or $17.9 million of this amount would have gone to the government's treasury to meet the needs of our Dominican people. Mr. Speaker, these are not the profits Dominic made over the period, because the profits were much more than that. These are the amounts they decided to pay out as dividend during that period. That is why we are confident that this was a decision fully in the interest of the people of Dominica. We, as a people, continue to experience the negative impact of fossil fuel-generated electricity. The reality is, when oil prices are high, the impact on our society, on our electricity bills and our finances is immediate. Furthermore, we are all aware of the negative environmental impact of electricity generation using diesel generators. Last but not least at all, I know that every Dominican is looking forward to the day when fuel surcharge, in general, will be no more on our electricity bills, and we have lower cost of electricity from our own renewable resources. The 10-megawatt geothermal power plant being developed in Loda will directly replace capacity currently provided by Dominic's diesel generators. Dominic will purchase electricity from the geothermal plant and distribute this electricity to consumers. Dominic will enter into a power purchase agreement with the geothermal company to purchase all the geothermal power produced. Based on the regulations of the Independent Regulatory Commission, the IRC, Dominic will not be permitted to enjoy any markup on the price of geothermal power sold to it. Public ownership of Dominic facilitates this significant change in Dominic's commercial model and will ensure that consumers enjoy the full benefit of cheaper geothermal power. Currently, the electricity transmission network is owned by Dominic. However, a new transmission network is being built together with the geothermal project to transfer the electricity from the geothermal power plant in Loda to the Fonkole and Sugarloaf electricity network centers and power generation facilities. This transmission network is also designed to A, relieve pressure on Dominic's 11 kV network, and thereby reducing losses and increasing reliability of the network. B, allow the efficient and resilient transmission of the 6 megawatts of hydro electricity from the Roseau Valley. And C, provide resilience to Dominic's electricity network to minimize the damage caused by hydrometeorological events and to allow for the quick reinstatement of power in the event of damage. The commercial agreements, Mr. Speaker, required for the investment in new transmission systems and for the sharing of infrastructure and resilience enhancement are greatly facilitated by Dominic's new ownership structure. Additionally, the operation and maintenance arrangements for this new transmission network will also strengthen as a result of government majority ownership of Dominic. The construction of a new transmission network will be financed by the World Bank. The financing will be highly concessional to the government so as not to become a burden on electricity consumers. At the time of negotiations, the majority shares in Dominic were privately owned. This created a major challenge for the government because of the concerns raised by the bank and the consequent consequent restrictions for the ownership, operation, and maintenance of the transmission asset. These restrictions no longer apply in how we arrange for this new network to be operated and maintained, as government now owns majority shares in Dominica. Mr. Speaker, based on the feedback that I have received, the people of Dominica have been comforted by the news that ownership of Dominic has returned to the people of Dominica. Many have expressed privately and publicly that they are not confident that one day, in the not too distant future, they will begin paying low rates for electricity in Dominica. We are experiencing trying times. The Russian-Ukraine war is having severe impact on the cost of petroleum and petroleum products worldwide, resulting in a corresponding increase in the cost of electricity. This government is doing everything within its control to reduce the impact on families and businesses. We have urged the IRC, the Independent Regulatory Commission, to accelerate its review on the electricity tariffs, while the government continues to push on to build and commission the geothermal plant. We are confident, Mr. Speaker, that with a reduction in the tariffs by the IRC, we can experience a reduction in the electricity rates in the meantime. And so we are urging the IRC to complete their assessment and evaluation and to make clear recommendations on a reduction in tariff. And we're very confident that we will see a reduction in tariffs, Mr. Speaker, and a corresponding reduction in our electricity bills in Dominica in the interim. And so we pray, Mr. Speaker, that good sense will prevail and there will be an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the reasons why there is currently an increase in electricity in Dominica, because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And added to this, Mr. Speaker, is our inability to get petroleum products from Venezuela under the Petro-Carib Agreement because of sanctions imposed on Venezuela by the United States of America. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I end, I urge every Dominican to continue to play his or her part in the building of his very beautiful nation. And I thank God for his blessings thus far on this nation and pray that he continues to work with us as we build a resilient, dynamic Dominica. We have also urged Dominica to engage more in public education and sensitization on how we as consumers can reduce on the consumption of our electricity at our homes and our businesses. There are tips that can be used to get this going. Mr. Speaker, I want to place on record my appreciation to Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson for his efforts during the negotiation of the purchase of Dominic. I had appointed Dr. Henderson before he became the member, well, before he had his second coming as a parliamentarian, to lead the negotiation on behalf of the government, and I think he did a fantastic job. And I also want to recognize the efforts of the Financial Secretary, Ms. Dennis Edwards, who is a very stern and I'm looking for the correct word, Mr. Speaker, negotiator, who was really very bright and very clear. And so I think the country is very blessed to have people like yourself managing the day-to-day finances of the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And also say to people that the ownership of Dominic certainly places us in a better position to manage and to maintain the process and to also seek to address the concerns that we all have with regards to electricity consumption. Just in respect to the government, Mr. Speaker, I have seen for this financial year about 2 supplementary appropriations for electricity. And so it's not only a concern for all consumers, but even government, because the government is the largest consumer of electricity in Dominica. And any increase is an impact on the government. This is why the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Public Works responsible for Dominic operations, we are pushing to have within the government system replace all bulbs through renewable energy bulbs. And so this is where everybody has to play their part in ensuring that we can, where possible, reduce on consumption of electricity. But we empathize with the public on the cost of electricity. But we're targeting, as I said, for the long-term geothermal project and also the reinstatement of the hydro power plant in the Rosa Valley. Because once you have renewable energy, then the fuel surcharge, and all of us who watch our electricity bill, the fuel surcharge is almost as high as our consumption. And so once we can get rid of this, we will see an automatic, permanent reduction in our electricity bills. But what we're doing now in the interim, and I've directed on this one in regards to the tariffs, that we need to review the tariffs, and it looks like there'll be a possible reduction in the tariffs, and certainly to see how we can work the fuel surcharge, whether there can be some different formula used so that we can see a reduction in the cost of the fuel surcharge. And these are directions I've given, and I'm hoping in the next few days or so we can get some work on this. On the tariff, a little easier. On the fuel surcharge, it will take a little longer to come up with this, with a new mathematics or formula for arriving at the fuel surcharge. But the fuel surcharge certainly will go away once we introduce geothermal, and of course the power plant is in full steam, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Introduction of bills.
Honorable Dennis, your mic is on.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Virtual Asset Business Act 2022 be read a first time.
Virtual Asset Business Act 2022.
The bill has been read a first time.
Public business, government business, motions.
Authorization for credit facility from the International Development Association, IDA, for funding of Dominica's COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery. Whereas, by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405, as amended, the House of Assembly may, by resolution duly passed, authorize the minister responsible for finance to borrow money from approved sources or guarantee loans to statutory boards or public corporations for the purpose of financing general development purposes in any foreign currency or currencies. And whereas, since February 2020, government has had to put the necessary infrastructure, human resource, and systems in place to mitigate against the spread of the COVID-19 disease. And whereas, the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted economic activity in Dominica, resulting in lower than expected revenues, while government has had to increase expenditure to adequately provide for the health response to the pandemic and sustain livelihoods and the economy. And whereas government intends to contract a second loan COVID-19 response and recovery programmatic development policy credit facility from the International Development Association, IDA, for a sum not exceeding $30 million United States dollars, equivalent to $81 million East Caribbean dollars to support Dominica in its COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery by 1, saving lives, protecting livelihoods, and preserving jobs, and 2, strengthening fiscal policies, public financial management, and debt transparency for a climate-resilient recovery. And whereas this second COVID-19 response and recovery credit facility includes reforms in support of fiscal consolidation, critical for investment in climate adaptation and building buffers to deal with recurrent climate events. It also builds on and deepens the fiscal and public financial management reforms being undertaken by government. Be it resolved that in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405, as amended, this Honorable House authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of credit a sum not exceeding $30 million United States dollars, equivalent to 81 million Eastern Caribbean dollars. Interest 0.75% per annum, plus a basis adjustment to the service charge, commitment charge of 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 annual installments commencing 60 semi-annual installments commencing November 15, 2032, and a grace period of 10 years.
I beg to second it, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek authorization for the Honorable Minister for Finance to borrow from the International Development Association a sum of 30 million United States dollars, equivalent to 81 million East Caribbean dollars, on the following terms: interest 0.75% per annum, plus a basis adjustment to the service charge, commitment charge of 0.5% per annum, repayment 60 semi-annual installments commencing November 15, 2032, a grace period of 10 years. Mr. Speaker, this request is being made in accordance with Section 3.1 of the Loans Act, Chapter 6405 of the 2017 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica, which authorizes the Minister with responsibility for finance to borrow money or guarantee loans from approved sources or guarantee loans to statutory corporations on behalf of the government for the purpose of financing general development or for other purposes by resolution passed in the House of Assembly. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to affect economic activity in Dominica. According to the IMF, Dominica's GDP grew by an estimated 3.7% in 2021, following an 11% decline in 2020. The IMF has projected growth of 6.8% in 2022. Mr. Speaker, during the first 9 months of this fiscal year, that is from July 2021 to March 2022, tax revenues increased by 2.4% over the period July 2020 to March 2021. However, Mr. Speaker, with the slow economic recovery from the pandemic, this increase in tax revenue for the period July 2021 to March 2022 is still 19.5% or 60.5 million EC dollars less than what was collected during the same period in fiscal year 2018-2019. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, while the government has succeeded in reducing non-COVID related recurrent expenditure, overall expenditure has remained high as the country continues to battle this deadly disease. And so, since March 2020, the government has spent, Mr. Speaker, listen to that, since March 2020, the government has spent in excess of 37.6 million EC dollars on the Ministries of Health Management of COVID-19, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is by no means all of the COVID-19 related expenditure, as this amount does not include, for example, the significant increase in the cost of securing our borders, the support provided to businesses which were and still are being affected, the tax relief and rebates to residents and businesses, the grants totaling $8.1 million, which were paid on government's behalf by the Dominica Social Security, and to the self-employed and employees who suffered significant loss of income. And that's just to name a few of the other COVID-19 related expenditure and transfers. The weak revenue performance, coupled with the increased expenditure related to the COVID-19 pandemic, has created a financing gap during this fiscal year. The Minister for Finance has approached the World Bank to obtain a budget support loan from the International Development Association, IDA, which would be used to bridge that gap. The bank had provided a similar loan to bridge the gap during the last fiscal year. This loan has been evaluated in the context of government's medium-term debt strategy and is consistent with the objectives of that strategy. At the end of December 2021, public debt to GDP stood at 100%, Mr. Speaker. This debt level is as a result of the loans procured for post-Hurricane Maria reconstruction and COVID-19 response and recovery, as well as the sharp decline in GDP since the start of the pandemic. Note, however, Mr. Speaker, that the debt to GDP ratio at the end of calendar year 2022 is not expected to increase as a result of this loan, due to the 6.8% growth projected for 2022. Mr. Speaker, this government would have preferred not to incur additional debt, as is characteristic of us. As you are aware, we were well on our way to bringing the debt to GDP ratio below 60% before those disasters, Mr. Speaker. However, having to respond to 3 major economic shocks in 5 years in a small country like Dominica with limited financial resources, government has had to deplete its reserves to respond to the needs of its people, reconstruct the country, support vulnerable businesses, and continue to provide services to residents. Many governments across the world would have by now increased taxes to recover the huge costs that this government has had to incur over the past 7 years. However, to date, we have tried our best not to increase taxes. We have instead provided tax relief by way of income tax deduction and rebates, and duty reduction and subsidies at customs. We have also continued all of the social programs which existed prior to these shocks. Mr. Speaker, we are hoping that the economy will continue to grow, and pray that God will continue to bless us and to protect us, particularly during the hurricane season this year, which is just about to begin. I now commend the resolution to the entire House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is before the House for debate.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank all members of this House because, Mr. Speaker, the facts are clear, Mr. Speaker. The facts are clear, Mr. Speaker. We have seen the destruction that was caused, Mr. Speaker. We have seen the destruction. Mr. Speaker, this House is a serious We're not here playing cat and mouse, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, yes.
We are here to do the people's
Honorable
business.
Minister, you wanted to speak, but you see, we have to be going through that over and over. If you just need to stand up. Okay, I'll allow the Honorable Senator to speak. Yes. But members, remember, we know the procedure. So if we intend to speak, just stand up.
I stood.
Let us rule. Yes, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm listening to the passionate proposal of this motion that you know what I heard? Just to name a few. You come to this honorable house, you are asking for us to support, to borrow funds, finances, to continue to support COVID-related expenses. And the only accounting I heard that made sense, Mr. Speaker, was from the Ministry of Health. Well, it did not even be correct, in excess of 33 million. Then you have another amount to secure our borders. What is the amount to secure our borders? You have an amount for businesses. What is the amount for businesses? You give tax rebate. What is the quantifiable amount? You give grants of 8.1 million. We heard this one. Self-employed. And just to name a few, what is the overall expenditure? How much have we collected over time for COVID for loans, and monies that were loaned to us, and grants? How much? It is easy accounting, Mr. Speaker. How much you received, how much was spent, what is the remainder? Why can't we get that kind of information? You come to the Honorable House and you tell us, just to name a few what? And I'm expected to stand here and justify the need for another loan. We said when we come to this house, we on this side always say we support anything that would be of benefit to the people of Dominica. But if we have to support something, we have to understand what it is that we are supporting. When you go to AGM meetings, Mr. Speaker, of your board of directors, you cannot expect the members also to decide that, hey, the board say we want money and give them money. We have to have justification for that. Every time is a willy-nilly information we get here, nothing concrete. And tell us it is okay, you should continue to support it. Yes, we support anything to benefit this country, but it has to be done with accountability, Mr. Speaker. Where is the report? We have never received any report. We've come day in and day out, agreeing to borrow money, 20 million by here, to be paid in 2022, 2020, 2032, 2033. The new generation has to pay that money, Mr. Speaker. How do we explain to people that the money was used wisely? How do I know that the money was used wisely when you tell me, just to name a few? Where is the few? What is the rest of the expenditure that was made under COVID that you cannot name to this honorable house? This is where we take decisions. Mr. Speaker, it is easy, and we are tired of coming here, listening to the same thing over and over again, and nothing concrete is given to us as to what it is that we are supporting. How can we, in good conscience, do so in the absence of reporting on the funds borrowed and allocated for the same purpose? Where did the money? We said to sustain livelihoods and the economy, health response to the pandemic, to strengthen fiscal policies, public financing management and debt transparency for a climate resilience country. We keep on saying that over and over again, and now it becomes a cliche, Mr. Speaker, that we need to know in this honorable house what is happening with the finances of the state. How is it being used? How is it being used? Mr. Speaker, could I have some peace, please? Thank you. How is it being used? And then we continue to support the measures for helping our people to move them from where they are. Because can we say on the ground that we can see the impact of all the millions and millions of dollars that we have loaned and we have been granted to in order to deal with COVID, Mr. Speaker? And if you all are serious, you're members of the House here, you will understand. I'm sure you all know this thing, right? You all have to understand what is going on here. We cannot just sit here with our head bows and our eyes closed and realize that what is happening here is the business of the House, is the business of the country. And we have to ask questions. This is the reason why we are here. $81 million, EC dollars. Some time ago, we had 170-something million, and you come there and you tell us, just to name a few. Just to name a few has no name, it has no amount, it has no justification. Mr. Speaker, we can do better than that, and if the members of this House are in agreement and if they are honest with themselves, they will understand that this is accounting. And Mr. Speaker, you know, you worked in business, so you could still continue to do so. Accounting is very important. Transparency is very important, because the monies that we loan belongs to the people of Dominica, because they are the ones who are going to pay it back. In 2032, the next generation. What are we going to do, Mr. Speaker? Are they going to ask us for reparation, like we are asking for reparation to the other countries for enslaving us? What is happening to us, Mr. Speaker? And we have a right to come here and question these, I don't want to use shady, Mr. Speaker, but I cannot understand what is happening with, just to name a few. Come here and justify something for me and make sense out of it, and I will, with a clarity, stand up and say, yes, they've done a very good job in the amount of money that they have received for COVID. I'm sure we're going ahead, because it goes to every Dominican, every resident of this country. It does not matter what their political affiliations are, but they benefited from this. Mr. Speaker, I hope that these monies that we are again loaning will create an impact on the lives of our people, and the poverty that we see in the various communities will be on a decrease. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to this debate. Mr. Speaker, we all live in Dominica, and we are quite aware that we were struck with a pandemic effective from 2020, March to be precise. And even, Mr. Speaker, before that we had any case of that pandemic in Dominica, this government started to put things in place to mitigate the impact of this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that we went to Portsmouth and we had this place retrofitted, and we actually created a brand new hospital, Mr. Speaker, from scratch, because we realized that we were going to be impacted one way or another by that pandemic. And Mr. Speaker, the first case of that pandemic was in my constituency, the Lapin constituency, and we first had people who actually benefited from the Portsmouth facility were from my constituency. They were all placed there. And that facility was well retrofitted and well put in place with staff, with the facilities was furnished with our medicines. We had staff there, we had doctors there, and we had all our equipment there in case we were hit by this pandemic, and we were impacted, as a matter of fact. Mr. Speaker, this country had been impacted before by other disasters. We will recall Tropical Storm Erica in 2015, and in 2017 we will recall Hurricane Maria. And this government had always come to the task, and they had always bring this country back to recovery. And that's exactly what was done in COVID, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we had also to put in place facilities for us to have our people quarantined in that part of the country, in Portsmouth, to be precise. We also had to house the staff of the Ministry of Health. We also had to provide food for the people that were being housed there. And all these incurred expenses on the government of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, we know that we cannot deny the fact that the COVID pandemic impacted the entire world, not only Dominica. And whilst the first world countries, the so-called first world countries, were being held hostage by this pandemic, they were being looked like they were helpless to fight it. This Dominican Labour Party government took on the pandemic head-on, and we went up forward and we mitigated it. Mr. Speaker, we are in Dominica, and we are looking around us, and we are seeing the fact that in spite of all what was going on during the COVID-19 pandemic, we continued to work well with other aspects of our economy. It did not impact us adversely in agriculture. We will continue to maintain our roads. Other parts of the hospital continue to be operational. And all this, Mr. Speaker, during a pandemic. So I find it rather strange that someone would come here and even remotely,
the honorable member,
would come there and even remotely question the fact that we need more, all these things incur expenses. And in the Portsmouth area, Mr. Speaker, food, the government spends $7,168,823.50 to feed the people that were placed there because they could not go hungry. We had to rent property, Mr. Speaker, to have the people. First of all, we had to rent for our staff. The staff had to be housed. And there were some people that were quarantined. We had to rent to quarantine them. And rental of property cost the government of Dominica $5,703,844.43. Mr. Speaker, professional and consultancy, $1,741,465.11. Mr. Speaker, salaries and wages, because not only did the government have to redeploy people that were already employed, we had to employ new people, new consultants to go there, Mr. Speaker. $1,662,075.14. Stop. No, I continue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, supplies and materials. We had to retrofit the place. We had to have materials there for the cooking for the patients and the other members of staff. We also had to, first of all, let me remind this House that we were the first country to receive vaccines in the Caribbean. We also were the first to receive ventilators, so much so that we helped our Caribbean brothers when they were in need, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, operation and maintenance, $19,415,058. Mr. Speaker, sundry expenses, $3,607,189.08. A total of $26 million in Portsmouth. $268,606.75. Mr. Speaker, we also had to be maintaining our CNCDs and all other health centers in the districts. We did not even have to incur this step in that. So the Senator, Joseph, by now would realize that the government of Dominica did spend and is being accounted. Now the $47 million does not involve, that is only in one facility. And we in Dominica should be very, very happy that this government took us from where we were in 2020, what was expected to be 15,000 deaths, 10,000 deaths, to under 100 deaths. And we will continue to do that. And at the Ministry of Health, we are thankful to our staff, because the staff are those that were on the field, scoring the runs, fielding the balls, catching the catches, and the Ministry of Health was there to see them through on the government. So the Ministry of Health was well staffed, and our staff did what they had to do. And I'm congratulating them, and I'm thanking them on the behalf of the government, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue to fight the COVID-19 virus head-on. We will continue to do what we have to do. And the ministry is now in the process of also taking on the CNCDs as in simultaneously with the COVID-19 virus. And the Ministry of Health of Dominica in Dominica, with the government of Dominica, headed by the Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, is very, 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 very aware of what is going on and we are taking our work very, very seriously. The people of Dominica comes first, and we will continue to do what we have to do to help them. And I will end by saying that I heard a calypso saying that the best thing that ever happened to this country was Kerrit and the Labour Party. It took this country from the brink of bankruptcy and took it to recovery. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill 100%.
No, well, if, Honorable John, if the Honorable Prime Minister yield to you, you can stand.
Mr. Speaker, my intervention is very short, but it goes back to what we were saying, and the senator from Lapley. Sorry.
There is no senator for La Plaine on that side.
Sorry, I just mean the...
On the government side. As a matter of fact, address him correctly.
Member of Parliament
yes.
for La Plaine.
And he's the Honorable Minister of Health acting right now.
Right. Oh, he's acting.
So please address him properly so the world can know.
Yeah.
Please.
So for the world to know.
Yeah. You have to do it properly.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable John.
I recognize the gentleman.
Yes, so do it. I haven't heard.
That. And I saw Mr. Edwards, the parliamentary representative for La Plaine, the acting Minister of Health. Welcome. What I said.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Jesus Christ. Mr. Speaker, earlier on, the Senator Joseph raised some concerns when the presenter of the motion spoke. And they were very genuine concerns, Mr. Speaker. Any financial institution you go to, you have to give a credit report or they ask you questions about your finances. We came here in this parliament sometime last year and drew down our first set of funds for the same COVID-19. We all gave it support. What we are simply asking on this side is to give us a breakdown of what transpired. When we heard all the breakdown that the minister gave,
the Honorable Minister
came to $26.2 million.
Mr. John, Honorable John.
Jeez, boy.
The Honorable Minister, or based on the standing order, the member for La Plaine constituency. That's how we need to say it so we can show the respect. Please, continue, but say that for me, please. So we at least we're on the same page there, according to the standing order.
Mr. Speaker, we all recognize on this side of the House as well what the pandemic did to us, and anything to assist the country to move in the right direction, we'll give support to it. What we are saying, Mr. Speaker, and I repeat it, we need accountability and transparency with these things. This is the state funds, not our personal money. And for us to come in this house to ask for that, and we have been ridiculed. Mr. Speaker, $30 million, $81 million to be paid by Dominicans in the next 10 years is not money you can pick from trees. It's money that we have to pay back. We have to invest wisely. We have to spend wisely. We have to be accountable. And as members of Parliament, we all, on both sides, should ensure that there is accountability. And asking where we spend, the presenter of the bill, the minister made mention of $47.6 million that was spent, and then Nisi and the rest, and other areas. I heard the minister spoke about quarantine, hospital imports, medicine, food, rental of properties, professional and consultancy, salaries and wages and supplies and materials and operational materials. Mr. Speaker, all these expenditures of the state, not the Labour Party, and asking for this in Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's important. I thank you, Mr. Minister, former Minister of Health. The IMF stated in its staff concluding statement of 2021, Article 4, mission in December 2021. The COVID pandemic hit Dominica hard, impacting tourism and related sectors. Mr. Speaker, we have heard members, people in the tourism sector has been trying to get support. We heard of a loan facility made available for them at the Aid Bank, and we're still hearing they're struggling. We're hearing that other people who got affected, single parents and others who got affected during the COVID pandemic. Have we seen it fit to provide some sort of support for them, to cushion the problem that they have, in financial issues that they're having when we get all these monies? These are some of the things we have to look at doing, that we have been asking on this side, to ensure that those in need or those who got affected by the pandemic, as you said, it was not only the health sector got affected, but every other sector got affected because of the pandemic. And that's where accountability comes in, or transparency, that we see where we spend the monies. And down the road, the $81 million that we're asking for now, that we are creating the platform to pay back. That is what we're asking for in this House, Mr. Speaker. And that is what I would like to see happen. And I close on this point saying that we need transparency, accountability on issues of this to ensure that we have good governance and to get support on both sides of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to the resolution presented by the Minister for Trade, Honorable Ian Douglas, seeking parliamentary approval for a sum of $81 million to support our COVID-19 recovery efforts. Now, we all recognize that every country in this world has been impacted by the pandemic. Developed countries as well as developing countries. In some countries, Mr. Speaker, they have the privilege of printing money. We don't have that privilege to be able to print money. We raise money through taxation, through grants, and through loans. And what we have been able to do as a small country in managing the COVID pandemic is exemplary. Our mission during this pandemic was to, one, save lives, and two, to maintain the dignity of our citizens, to ensure that as far as possible they could keep their jobs. And you recognize, Mr. Speaker, for several months, public officers were not coming to work because of the need for social distancing and to protect them. But they all got paid. Every member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, got paid on time every month. Every pensioner in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, get a pension every single month. All our social services, social safety net programs have been maintained. The NEP that has been chastised and criticized by opposition members, we paid everybody on time, Mr. Speaker, during this pandemic period. And what we have been able to do in terms of the management of COVID-19, which my dear friend so well articulated, the Member of Parliament for Lapley, in such a clear voice. And he simply highlighted just aspects of our intervention. Just aspects of our intervention. What Mr. Douglas did, Honorable Douglas did, was to highlight some aspects of it. In the budget estimates, all of the details of expenditure for the financial year will be reported. revenues as well as detailed expenditure will be reported in the budget of this year. And people should know that. And so why should we want to cast aspersions over this and to give people the impression there's no transparency and no accountability? This government, Mr. Speaker, has been known to be transparent and accountable for people's money. The World Bank does give you money, Mr. Speaker, like that, you know. There are allocations, there are quotas, but you have to justify, you have to present documentation. And we have to end up negotiating with them. Similar to how any one of us here or in the country go to get a loan at a credit union or a bank. They ask for all kinds of things. And when we complete this process, Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General must write to say that the legal processes in accordance with the law of Dominica have been fulfilled. And we must not do that. We must not speak on both sides of our mouths. We support everything the government does, but we don't support anything the government does now. Never. And when in all of this pandemic, Mr. Speaker, we could have said as a government that we're not building no homes for anybody, we're not fixing any homes for anybody, Mr. Speaker, but we continue to build homes and fix homes for Dominican citizens. We have not turned down one Dominican who has come to us, Mr. Speaker, during this pandemic period to say we have to go overseas for medical care and we need 100,000 EC dollars or 200,000 EC dollars. We have helped every single person to go to this country to seek medical care. We could have easily said so, and people will understand. And so what we have been doing, Mr. Speaker, and if all of the concessions we have given in this financial year and the one before this, much to the surprise of Dominicans, all of this didn't cost money. Even the subsidies we are providing now, we provide a subsidy now on diesel and gasoline. We are absorbing the cost of this. We are putting back monies in people's pockets because if we do not provide the subsidy, we would have to pay our citizens who go to the pumps. We're spending now, Mr. Speaker, in excess of $22 million on farm roads across Dominica, and we are doing assessments of additional ones. We're doing assessments of additional ones. We're building playing fields and basketball courts. Nowhere in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, no government spending money on a playing field because in terms of the scheme of things for many governments, that's a low down on the agenda. So, notwithstanding the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the huge cost, at one point, as we reported here to the Parliament, you can't take the truth. You ask questions and you're going out. And you're still getting paid because, you know, not the government be able to raise money to pay salaries. You see what I'm saying? So you ask questions, you don't want it, you want the truth hitting you, you go outside and pretending somebody calling you. Nobody can call you while in Parliament. You see what I'm saying? You're going out there. And that is the disservice they provide to the country. They're on camera, so they say something, and then that's it. Nothing else. No compassion, no empathy, no concern. Just be negative. And so, at one point, Mr. Speaker was saying that our revenue dropped by 33.3%. Looking at the VAT alone. But expenditure increased. We had among the Caribbean countries, not only Caribbean countries, the Americas, one of the most comprehensive systems in place to manage COVID-19. And so, yes, you can ask questions, but do so honestly. And when you receive the response, recognize that you have been given the response. If you're serious about the question that you've raised. And so, Mr. Speaker, whether it's European Union funds, we have been able to account for it. Whether it's local funds, we can account for it. Whether it's World Bank funds, we can account for it. anytime. And we have spent this money and will continue to spend money on the people of this country. But when it comes to the management of COVID-19 and our efforts to respond and to provide the recovery impetus, Mr. Speaker, we need to be commended as a government and a country for our efforts as a small country. And coming on the heels of the most devastating natural disaster any Caribbean country has seen, Mr. Speaker, 226% of the GDP impacted. If that was a developed country, Mr. Speaker, I keep telling them when I meet with them, that 90% of the GDP, 2 years later, 226% plus COVID-19, how you survive? But we are grateful to the Lord, Mr. Speaker, that he continues to be with us and he continues to guide us and provide us with the resources and the friends and the relationship that we develop will provide the support to us. So I really want to commend the Minister for his statement and the highlighting of some of the aspects of the expenditure. And the Minister was transparent. He didn't say that's all the expenditure. What is transparency, Mr. Speaker? He didn't say that's all the expenditure. He said just to highlight a few. Because in the estimates of expenditure and revenues that will come to the Parliament very soon, Mr. Speaker, all of the information will be captured in this document. All. But to say that he is not transparent, when he has said up front, just to name a few, he highlighted some, and he says, just to name a few, meaning that there are others. Transparency and accountability, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, we welcome this opportunity and we look forward to the support of the entire House as we move ahead with the business of the state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. This resolution for authorization for credit facility from the International Development Association, IDA, for funding of Dominica's COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery is before this House for debate. And in debate on this side, we are simply seeking to have a better understanding in the public interest of how these funds being loaned will be spent and how the funds loaned previously have been spent. There's nothing about that for anybody to get upset about. We have a responsibility in this House to account to the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica for their monies. So now we're saying that on behalf of the people of Dominica, we will contract a loan with the International Development Agency for $81 million, and we will start paying back for it in 2032. I will not be here in 2032. A number of you will still be here, I'm sure. But when that time comes, it will not be your responsibility to pay, it will be the responsibility of the people to pay. It's the people's money that will pay. So the people simply need to understand clearly what is happening with the funds, whether it be loan, whether it be grant, whether it be taxes, whether it be sale of citizenship. The people need to know how their money is being spent. And since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government of Dominica has received from multilateral aid institutions over $150 million. That's for Dominica's health care and Dominica's economic stabilization response. The intention of the institutions that make these funds available to us, very good terms, some grants, some loans, but as you can see from what's before us, the terms of the loans are very favorable. and it is not for us in Dominica specifically. That's how the IDA hands out and distributes these assistance programs. 3.5%, 0.75% interest, etc., etc. But in this loan, this $81 million, we are now saying that it is to support Dominica in its COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery. One, saving lives. The Prime Minister said we have been saving lives, and we'll continue so to do. Protecting livelihoods and preserving jobs. From the reports on the other side, we've been doing that, and we'll continue to do that. But in simple terms, what has been the expenditure on these areas? Is that so difficult to ask? Is that such an impossible question to pose? Does that merit all of the insultive language from the other side when questions are being asked about the expenditure? And then number two says, to support Dominica in its COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery by strengthening fiscal policies, public financial management, and debt transparency for a climate resilient recovery. Mr. Speaker, that's above my pay grade. Because that nexus, I don't get it. COVID-19 response, recovery, and then strengthening fiscal policies now. We're getting money to strengthen fiscal policies, public financial management, and debt transparency for a climate resilient recovery in this money from the International Development Agency for funding of Dominica's COVID-19 pandemic response. So am I not supposed to ask, Mr. Speaker? This component number 2, strengthening fiscal policies, public financial management, and debt transparency for a climate resilient recovery, how much of this COVID-19 response money is going to be absorbed in that? Is that a reasonable question? Will somebody answer it? Okay. Now, Mr. Speaker, the institutions that help us out, they wanted to know, one, that we were dealing with our emergency health care requirements to ensure that we had a strong, well-prepared, properly resourced healthcare system for COVID-19 in terms of prevention, in terms of detection, rapid response capability, additional hospital capability, availability of necessary medication, supplies, equipment, including testing equipment, including ventilators and the like, and adequate provisions for the protection of frontline healthcare workers. So in debate, all of these issues come up. What is so difficult about at this particular time? So much time has gone by. We've been with COVID since March of 2020. Where is the itemized listing of the various COVID-related expenses that we have had to undergo legitimately and necessarily for the Commonwealth of Dominica? What is so difficult about putting a little table together, a little spreadsheet? It said, line item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50 something. This is the money we spent. And this is where we are. We are also interested in relief, recovery, economic stimulation to ensure that there was income support for displaced and unemployed workers. We've spoken about that, but no specifics. Cash transfers to vulnerable families. We've spoken about that, but no specifics. Support for vulnerable sectors. We've spoken about that, but no specifics. They just say, well, we spend that, and there is some other areas on which we spend as well. What's the term they use? So, a few other things. A few other things. Just to name a few. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to give you a quantification of just to name a few in a while. And also a concern about supply chain and business continuity support for the private sector. We hear about private companies that have been assisted. To what extent? What is the amount? Because, Mr. Speaker, up until June 30th, 2021, the end of the financial year 2020-2021, the government received, for COVID-19 emergency response, soft loans from the IDA of the World Bank, $86 million. Soft loan from the OPEC fund, $27 million. There's a loan from the CDB for $6.7 million and a grant from the IMF Rapid Credit Facility of $38 million, a total of $157.7 million. So you received the money. What did you do with it? In addition to these cash amounts, government has received significant contributions of vaccines, medical supplies and equipment, personal protective equipment from friendly governments and donor organizations. The government's revenue and expenditure accounts approved by Parliament, we come into the budget cycle now, and all the things we say are included in detail in these estimates. What we see and what we have gotten so far is a total COVID-19 emergency response spending of $2.1 million in 2019-2020 and $5.4 million in 2020-2021, a total of $7.5 million. The COVID-19 emergency response spending for 2020-21, 2021-2022, which is where we are right now, that was budgeted, what I saw in the budget last year, which was approved, was $1.6 million. So, if we take on board now what we heard from the presenter of this motion this morning, that since March of 2021, we've had COVID-19 expenditure of $37.6 million. Prior to that, we had $7.5 million in the budget. So we have 7.5 before, we have a new 37.6 million being reported to us today, and we have the grants via Dominica Social Security at $8.1 million. That's a total of $52.3 million. But you have received $157.7 million, and if you back out the $53.2 million, you're down to, what's the name of the thing there? Just to name a few. The rest of, outside of the just to name a few, you have $104.5 million that the other side has a responsibility to tell, not us, but the nation, what did he do with it? And today, we heard a number of things that the government said was done. Ever just put a little money by it now, and let us see the $157 million. But right now, what you're giving us is $50+ million from 157, which puts us in a position where we're asking questions about $104.5 million. Mr. Speaker, the people of Dominica, to whom this money belongs, and especially those who have suffered and continue to suffer as a result of measures taken by the government to fight coronavirus, but have received no relief economic stimulus, have a right to know what exactly have these funds been used for. And shouting that we did this, we did that, we want quantification. When you say the line item that you spent on, put the figure by it. And let us see how let us see where we are with our $157.7 million, because now we're adding to that $157.7 million, $81 million, which takes the COVID-19 emergency response and recovery debt up to $238.7 million. We will not pay it back now, but we have to pay it back. It adds to the debt stock. It adds to the debt to GDP ratio. And all we're asking, very simply, is for a proper accounting for these monies, if that's not too much to ask, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to fully endorse the resolution to contract EC 81 million for recovery efforts. Not money spent already on COVID, but for recovery efforts given the dampening effects of COVID-19 on our economy. But Mr. Speaker, before I make this brief intervention on the matter, permit me to give all glory and honor to the Almighty Father for his grace and mercy over our country, given the number of successive disasters that we have had to manage within a few years, all having disastrous impact on our fragile economy. An economy with a GDP of only 1.3 billion annually. But we have had to spend much more on that, on our recovery efforts, given the disasters Dominica has had to face, Mr. Speaker, and we are still standing strong. And Mr. Speaker, permit me today to salute the Dr. Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit and the people of Vickers for raising such a dynamic, wise, and committed leader who has stirred this ship through the many disasters we have mentioned today, Mr. Speaker. And not just the disasters mentioned, starting from the brink of collapse of the economy left by the United Workers' Party. This is how far disasters started in Dominica, and since then we've been battling through them, Mr. Speaker. And now, a health crisis, which has cost the government, you heard Honorable Douglas, about 40 million so far. So sometimes, because of how quickly our economy is able to bounce back, we take the leadership and hard work of this government for granted. And who can blame us at times, Mr. Speaker? The Prime Minister makes the work look so easy. But, Mr. Speaker, today we have to salute our gem beyond compare in this house, Roosevelt Skerrit from Vickers. After every disaster, every time we have been tested, we have risen as a more resilient nation. And the proof is visible all over Dominica, including the Marigot Hospital, health and wellness centers, schools that were rebuilt after Hurricane Maria and we are still building, roads, bridges, vaccines, and effective policies and programs to cushion the impact of disasters on livelihoods. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we are very, very thankful to the people and government of Cuba for conferring the highest award on our Prime Minister, the Jose Marti Order. This international award is not just for the Prime Minister, it is for all Dominicans, that a small little country like us on the map could rise to such high heights, Mr. Speaker. Extraordinary heights. So today, Mr. Speaker, right here in this house, I want to move an honorary motion to bestow another doctorate on Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit for his outstanding work in crisis management, having kept the economy afloat, and clearly created a blueprint to develop the first climate resilient country. So let it be known in this honorable house, Dr. Honorable Roosevelt Swain, take that, leader of the opposition. But Mr. Speaker, today I stand here to boldly declare that the tourism industry is rebounding. And that is why, opposition leader, we need to get the $81 million for recovery, because we're rebounding. To promote our country, Mr. Speaker, for the cruise season, we received 45% more cruise calls over 2019, that is pre-COVID. 11 cruise ships made their inaugural call to Dominica, 11 new ships. 80,000 disembarked to do tours and support our vendors. And this July, for the first time, Mr. Speaker, we expect a visit from Disney Cruise Lines. So I need the money to promote the destination. In ferry, Mr. Speaker, we saw that ferry people coming to Dominica by ferry. During the early days of COVID, we only had 12%, but Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report by April, that number has increased to 28%. So more visitors are coming from the French West Indies, Mr. Speaker. So I need the money to promote the destination in the French West Indies and France, Mr. Speaker. And even in the yachting sector, Mr. Speaker, the livelihoods of many persons within the sector in communities such as Portsmouth and Newtown are beginning to recover, as yachts call are over 30% over 2019. And Mr. Speaker, we have to support PAYS and NAYS in the South, Mr. Speaker, for the great work they have done, but they still need some funding to make some major repairs on their boats and other equipment. So we really need the funds that we're trying to seek to pass in this house today. But I want to specifically report to the House, Mr. Speaker, because of the direct flight from the US market. And I want to specifically report on that, because when the opposition leader heard the news, he referred to it as an old plane, Mr. Speaker, an old plane. But I have news for him this morning, Mr. Speaker, about the old plane. The old plane that he spoke about, Mr. Speaker. That because of that old plane, Mr. Speaker, we are recovered almost 99% from visitors from the US market, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, between January and April, 1,505 visitors have come from that market. And this is the highest share of total arrivals from the US market in Dominica over the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. So that is how much it is doing, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in our best year in tourism, which is 2019, we received 17% visitors from the US market. And we are confident that with the funds that we shall receive from the loan being contracted, we can continue our bold marketing campaigns to double those figures. And Mr. Speaker, this isn't politics. We recently met with our new US marketing agent, Zapwater Communications, and they have told us that they are confident that we are going to even exceed the targets that we have set, Mr. Speaker. So thanks to that old plane, opposition leader, Honorable Linton, Dominican nationals abroad and many visitors in general are enjoying direct access to our country. So I really want to thank our Dominican national abroad for their tremendous support. I also wish to welcome all the new visitors who are discovering our island. You see, Mr. Speaker, being on the American airline platform gives us access to 30 million customers. And we are optimistic that once these flights continue to perform well, other airlines will follow, Mr. Speaker. That is how it is done, because it's a business. And what does that mean for our economy? As I mentioned last week, Mr. Speaker, to a group of intelligent fifth graders at St. Luke's School, my newest group of tourism ambassadors. More visitors translate to more people staying at hotels, to more people consuming goods and services, to greater demand for goods and services, so more money in the economy, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when I asked them, what does more money do for our country? They all responded, gives the government more money to develop Dominica, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, when I asked them, so why is the government building an international airport? Mr. Speaker, to my amazement, they said an international airport means it's easier for people to come to Dominica, it is more affordable, more visitors mean more money, and we can develop the country. So, Mr. Speaker, even fifth graders understand the importance of an international airport, something that the opposition is still debating, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I am very happy that the future of Dominica looks bright, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, and I want to move to housing, Mr. Speaker. This government has achieved a lot in housing, Mr. Speaker. But we know, Mr. Speaker, despite the number of homes we are providing, Mr. Speaker, there is still more work to be done. Just last week, somebody messaged me and said to Mr. Speaker, that Palrep, I love you, but I feel like you hate me, Palrep, because I'm still waiting on funds to repair my roof. You ask why we are contracting this 81 million for recovery efforts. I'm explaining to you what is happening to the people on the ground, how people are still feeling the impacts of disasters. And we as a government have to respond like we always do.
Well, Honorable Minister is just going to ask about the relevance.
Yes.
So you have to explain the relevance.
Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, these funds will be used to continue our housing recovery efforts, because there are still families who are dependent on this government for proper shelter or to build a new home, Mr. Speaker. So people still need help. And Mr. Speaker, I know the opposition thinks that Dominica is not a real country. And so that's why they don't understand the hard work of this government. Because you know for yourself that a particular senator, Senator John Finn, on the opposition side, went to Barbados to represent the opposition party in an important forum with U.S. congressmen between OECS and Barbados. And her major contribution to that meeting, if you recall, Mr. Speaker, was one, that there was a person in Cassie Bruce that didn't receive help to repair a roof, and she's questioning. And the second one, she said, but you know Dominica, not a real country, to the embarrassment of everybody who was present. You know that in that forum, there were members on the opposition and government side of every country. The only country that a member sought to embarrass was the member of opposition from Dominica, Senator John Finn. Because that is the relevance of the thing. You all do not take the matters of the country seriously. So when we come and debate the reason why we are contracting a loan for 81 million, you will not understand. Because you do not think it's a real country, so you don't believe people have real needs. But we in the government...
Honorable Minister, you can make your point, but do not bring in the speaker in the matter.
Sorry, Speaker.
So if you're going to make your point, just make your point.
Mr. Speaker, I delete the part about you.
Yes, you can proceed.
I delete the part about you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker,
I'm going to join this.
She went all the way to Barbados to say that there are people who still need housing assistance. So I'm saying that is why we are contracting the loan, to continue the housing revolution. So why the... Right. Mr. Speaker, even in the small business unit, given the impact of COVID on the country, when I checked the record, Mr. Speaker, we have requests from young entrepreneurs or existing business owners totaling $7 million, Mr. Speaker. $7 million requests before the small business unit, Mr. Speaker. So these funds are to help us to restore livelihoods in the country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, everyone understands that funds allocated to certain sectors had to be redirected to the Ministry of Health to save lives. The health and safety of our people have been our top priority during this difficult period. But I'm extremely proud of our progressive health protocols which allowed us to reopen the economy, and that despite the fact that government revenues decreased, not one civil servant was sent home. Salaries were paid on time, and all our social programs were maintained. So even if we had to sacrifice and forgo some important projects, which we now have to continue to implement, we ensured that families, especially those under the NEP program, and senior citizens receive a pension and continue to receive income, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to say that since we have reopened and relaxed our protocols, that we have seen an increase in economic activity, and certain sectors in the economy is also rebounding, not only in the entertainment industry, but Mr. Speaker, hairdressers, boutiques, makeup artists, car rentals, spas, and food vendors have all been benefiting, Mr. Speaker. So I know everybody is excited and looking forward to World Creole Music Festival, and I need funds to secure the artists for World Creole Music Festival, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this government, as part of its 2019 manifesto, made a commitment to the people of Dominica to create a dynamic economy. And despite the unforeseen disasters that we have had to battle, this Roosevelt-Skerry-led administration is focused on delivering on that commitment. Just with the investments being made in tourism with the upgrade of our products, will translate, and we can talk about Tito Gorge, the plans we have for Champagne facility, Mr. Speaker. This will make Dominica the most talked about destination in our region. We have a clear strategy in tourism, which is focused on distinctly marketing our natural assets on the various pillars. Our aqua pillar, which promotes our destination for scuba diving, whale watching, and other water sports activity, is performing very well. This year, we intend to do major upgrades to the 10 most popular sites in Dominica. These projects, unfortunately, were delayed by the funds redirected to battle with the pandemic. So now we are receiving new funding. I can continue the work on those projects, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we also are going to build a cable car to the Boiling Lake, a project which has caused much buzz in the media recently, and is expected to certainly advance our tourism agenda, as we shall be distinctly known for having the longest cable car to the second boiling lake in the world, or the second largest boiling lake in the world, or the first largest in the Western Hemisphere, Mr. Speaker. This means that many more people can visit this natural wonder, whether young or old. Currently, we are finalizing the feasibility and environmental impact studies and securing the lands for this major tourism project in the Roseau Valley. So this 81 million is critical to continue the great work of this Dominica Labour Party administration for the people of Dominica. I only ask that our people remain focused. This country is on its way to birthing some critical projects which will certainly create an economic boom in our country. This is a season to be wise about our actions and utterances. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage all our people to continue to pray for your government and country, as the world is still in crisis mode. The Russia-Ukraine war has certainly added to the global pressures and is already causing food shortages in major countries. Nevertheless, this government is focused on transforming our economy, so it is imperative for all of us to get on board. All of us to get on board on the ship to creating dynamic Dominica. Don't get distracted by the little rafter floating aimlessly in the water. headed nowhere with no plans, and many captains. As you know what they say about having too many captains, cooks. You know what they say about that. Confusion, confusion, confusion. I mean, Mr. Afimate, it is twilight years. No one wants to lead people to walk in Roseau. I mean, this reminds me.
Honorable Minister, do not call members of the public names.
I withdraw, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, many people in their twilight years want to lead Dominica to a greater future, Mr. Speaker. This reminds me of the tragedy of Jim Jones. Let's get serious, Mr. Speaker. They are all under one umbrella. Opposition and distractors to create opposition and distractors, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the good Lord is ready for Dominica. Is ready for the prosperity of Dominica. Get ready, Dominicans. Be like the wise virgins. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I fully endorse the resolution to contract $81 million, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry,
Mr. Speaker, let me...
Honorable Minister Douglas, I see that the Honorable Minister Henderson is on his feet there, so I recognize you, Honorable Minister Henderson. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I fully understand why Minister Douglas is so anxious to wind up the debate. We feel that for such a matter, there shouldn't be much to debate about. And I know we're also anxious to get on with the people's business. But thank you for permitting me a few minutes, and they will be rather few. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the resolution, the authorization for credit facility from the International Development Association, a member of the World Bank, for funding of Dominica's COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is aimed to respond and recovery to COVID-19 by 1, saving lives, protecting livelihoods, and preserving jobs, and 2, strengthening fiscal policies, public financial management, and debt transparency for a climate-resilient recovery. Mr. Speaker, I perhaps wish to say that the presenter could have used the opportunity to brag a little, to really boast of the many achievements that the government has done. So I don't even think that the senator who raised this point realized what she was saying. Because clearly, if the presenter had stood up and go line by line by line by line of what this Dominica Labour Party government has done in response to COVID, we'll be here till the end of the day. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we consider the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the world, when we consider that over 600 million people have been infected by COVID-19, and over 6 million people have lost their lives throughout the world, when you consider that there are countries now that are undergoing civil unrest, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, when we consider what is happening around the world, because these countries are grappling with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, we must consider ourselves very, very fortunate in Dominica. And you know, when we put all of this in context, and we have to appreciate that leadership really matters. It matters who is leading your country, especially in a time of crisis. But it's also important to recognize the sacrifices, the commitment, the diligence of our public officers in particular, and the Ministry of Health for having helped us to emerge from a pandemic that could have devastated us as it has many other countries. But Mr. Speaker, I want to just repeat something that the Minister of Finance said this morning. We are here debating a loan facility to assist us in our COVID recovery efforts. We're not fortunate enough to print money, as he said. We cannot just call the central bank and say we need another 50 million, so just print that. The United States of America, when it got hit by COVID, printed a lot of money. And you know what happened? Inflation, unprecedented, almost 9%, double digit, nearing double digit inflation. That is the impact of a country being able to print more money without having the ability to back up a loan facility. We have seen it throughout the world, in all the countries with advanced economies, and are able to do that. But let me tell you something about the point that was raised, and I see the members of the opposition who are beating themselves over accountability and transparency. Of course, there will be opportunities for that. The budget will have the line items. You will have all the details. You will be able to summon the financial secretary or the permanent secretaries in the respective ministries to get them to account in the Public Accounts Committee. You will have those opportunities. So making all of this excitement about accountability and transparency, you know is nonsense. But here's the thing I want to tell you. Let me tell you something. The government of Dominica today is coming to the Parliament for the authorization of a loan from the World Bank. You really think the World Bank will give us money if we couldn't account for the first portion they gave us? I mean, I don't even know why we're having this debate. The World Bank has the most stringent rules of any lending institution in the world. This is not your credit union where you're a friend on the credit committee or your nenen. You think Scarrett knows the World Bank people then? When you consider the fact that we are going before the World Bank.
Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, for the purpose, it loses the whole effect. But the Honorable Prime Minister. The Honorable Prime Minister.
We just want to keep it real.
The Honorable Prime Minister. You know, but he won't take offense. You know, when we consider the fact that Dominica has received from the World Bank the most funds per capita than any other country in this part of the world. You know what this means? That the World Bank has given Dominica the seal of approval. The World Bank is saying that it is so satisfied with our ability to manage the resources that we get more. There are countries within our region who themselves cannot go to the World Bank to access either funds. They cannot access it. One, because perhaps the debt to GDP ratio is unsustainable. They have too much debt compared to the production of the country. They may find themselves in situations where there are outstanding matters that they are not able to resolve with the World Bank. But today we are able to access funds from the International Development Association at the lowest possible interest rates you will find anywhere, 0.75%, with a grace period of 10 years. It gives us an opportunity to recover from COVID before the first payment is due. Those things don't just happen, you know. And the thing is, I always blame the PM, you know, because he has a way of making the thing look too easy, man. He makes it look too easy that sometimes all man think they can do that too. And because he makes it look so easy, people don't appreciate the challenges we have to go through to be able to access those funds. Because to meet the requirements, I've been working on projects with the World Bank for the last decade, I can tell you. Whether it's through SIDSDOC, whether it's through Dominica Geothermal Development Company, it is extremely difficult to meet those requirements. Let me tell you something, my friend over there. Let me tell you something. Senator Joseph. Senator Joseph. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Senator Joseph. Let me just give you a little bit. You know, in order for Dominica to qualify for this facility, you know one of the things that the World Bank requires? The existence of adequate macroeconomic policy framework. That is to say, the government must be able to demonstrate to the World Bank that it is responsible, it can account for funds that are disbursed, and that those funds go into areas that will help to generate economic activity to ensure that we are able to repay when the repayment time is due. That is what it calls for. In addition, the World Bank is saying, in order for us to qualify for those funds, we must be able to demonstrate that we have in existence a satisfactory disaster risk management program, which includes being prepared for the next pandemic. That is what it is calling for. And we will not get the funds if we're not able to meet these requirements. So all this excitement and people getting themselves all worked up over what? Just because the minister maybe sell himself short and didn't give the whole list then. But your parliament gave you the list, Senator Joseph. And you couldn't take it, you go outside. You couldn't take it. So the truth is, we should be happy that our government qualifies for World Bank funds at this time so that we can relieve the pressure on our people, to ensure that we can protect their livelihoods. That is what this is about, and that's what we should be celebrating, not wasting time over a bunch of things that your cliches. Not wasting time on your cliches. This is serious work, this is serious work, Senator. Senator, when we come here before the House, this is serious business. And to come with a resolution to approve funds. And you know, I'll tell you, maybe you don't know. Maybe, again, sorry. I should have a little patience. Maybe you don't know. No, you don't know. You know when the resolution comes here, what it means? It means the thing cook already, you know. It approved, you know. This is the last act. The act of Parliament, which is required to give the legal authorization of the government to go ahead and access the funds. So it means all the negotiations have taken place, all the requirements, and you know, maybe, again, you might have a little point, you know, among others, because the minister could have told you the amount of things we had to do to meet the requirements of the World Bank, so that today we can come asking for authorization. Because there's a lot of work that went in there. And the financial secretary and her staff had to ensure that we meet all these requirements. The permanent secretaries in the respective ministries had to ensure we meet the requirements. The ministers who are responsible for the portfolios had to meet these requirements to ensure that we would qualify to access the World Bank funds. So when you hear people talking about things you don't understand, just listen, sit, listen, and learn. Sit, listen, and learn, and if you have a question, ask your question. But that's a difficulty. That's a difficulty with you know, some of them on the other side. They don't listen, and they're not anxious to learn. And Mr. Speaker, I commend this resolution.
Speaker, I move that this Honorable House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that this House be suspended until 3 p.m. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House stands suspended until 3 p.m.